There were 6 of us on that trip. We'd been hiking since early morning, and by the time we found somewhere to stop, the sun was already disappearing behind the trees. Nobody wanted to keep walking. We'd found a small clearing beside a stream, flat enough for the tents and far enough from the main trail that we'd have some privacy. It was one of those campsites you get lucky with. Flat ground, clean water, no sign of anybody else for miles. We spent the evening drinking, talking rubbish around the fire, and arguing over whose turn it was to collect more wood. Looking back on it now, that's probably the part that bothers me most. Everything felt normal. Around midnight, Matt woke me up. He looked pale, not scared exactly, confused. He pointed into the trees and asked if I could see the light. At first I couldn't. Then I noticed it. A campfire, somewhere deeper in the forest. Orange light flickering between the trunks. The strange thing wasn't that somebody else was camping nearby. The strange thing was how still it looked. No movement, no voices, no torchlight, just a fire burning in complete silence. After about 10 minutes, curiosity got the better of us. 3 of us grabbed our torches and headed towards it. The walk couldn't have taken more than a minute. Then we stepped into the clearing, and my brain just stopped. For a few seconds, I genuinely couldn't understand what I was looking at, because the campsite in front of us was ours, not similar, ours. My backpack was leaning against a tree, exactly where I'd left it. Matt's red camping chair was beside the fire. Even the half-empty crate of beer we'd brought was sitting next to the cool box. Everything was there, exactly where it should have been. Then Jake lifted his torch, and the light landed on the people sitting around the fire. There were 6 of them, and every single one was staring at us. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The 6 people sitting around the fire were completely motionless, just staring at us. I remember thinking they looked wrong somehow. Not physically wrong, just off. Like when you see somebody from a distance and instantly know it's someone you recognize, even before you can see their face. I knew who they were, before I could actually make them out. Then Jake whispered, "That's us." And suddenly I realized why. The person sitting in the red chair was wearing Jake's jacket. The person beside the cool box was wearing mine. Every one of them was dressed exactly like one of us. Nobody said anything after that. We just stood there, watching them, and they watched us back. The whole thing couldn't have lasted more than 30 seconds, but it felt much longer. Then Matt did something incredibly stupid. He shouted, "Who are you?" The sound echoed through the trees. The figures didn't react, not immediately. Then one of them smiled, not a normal smile, a huge smile, far wider than it should have been. The others followed, one by one, 6 identical grins appearing around the fire. Nobody moved, nobody blinked. They just sat there smiling, watching us. I felt sick, genuinely sick. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to leave, to run, to get as far away from that clearing as possible. Then the one wearing my clothes stood up, slowly, very slowly, and that's when I realized something that still makes me feel ill when I think about it. It wasn't just wearing my clothes, it was wearing my backpack too. The same scratches, the same keychain, the same water bottle clipped to the side. Everything, every tiny detail. It was mine. The thing took a step towards us, then another. Its smile never changed. None of the others moved, only that one, the one dressed like me. Jake grabbed my arm and shouted that we needed to go. Nobody argued. We turned and ran. Branches hit our faces. Roots caught our feet. I don't think any of us stopped to look behind us. Not once. The strange thing is, the campsite wasn't where we'd left it. It should have taken less than a minute to get back. Instead, we ran for almost 10. The trees looked unfamiliar. The stream was gone. The path was gone. And for the first time that night, I realized we were lost. Eventually, we gave up and went to sleep. At least, that's what we tried to do. Nobody was really sleeping. Every little sound seemed louder than usual. I remember checking my phone several times just to distract myself. Around 3 in the morning, I heard somebody walking outside my tent, slow footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. At first I assumed it was one of the others, maybe somebody unable to sleep. The footsteps circled the campsite once, then twice, then a third time, always at the same pace, never speeding up, never slowing down. Eventually I unzipped the tent and looked outside. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. The footsteps continued. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I could hear them clearly. Somewhere beyond the firelight, moving in a circle around the camp. I wasn't the only one hearing them. A second tent unzipped, then another. Within minutes, all 6 of us were standing around the fire listening. Nobody said a word. The footsteps continued for almost 20 minutes. Always the same distance away, always hidden by the trees, never getting closer, never moving further away. Then they stopped. Just stopped. The silence afterwards felt worse. Nobody wanted to go back to sleep. We stayed around the dying fire for a while, listening, waiting, expecting the footsteps to start again. They never did. Eventually Matt walked over to grab another drink from the cool box. A few seconds later, he froze. At first, none of us noticed. Then he said, "Guys, I've never heard fear in somebody's voice like that before." He wasn't looking into the trees. He wasn't looking at the darkness. He was staring at the lid of the cool box. The scratches hadn't been there earlier. I know that for a fact. We'd been using the cool box all evening, opening it constantly. There was no way we could have missed them. Yet they were impossible to ignore. Deep grooves carved directly into the plastic, fresh enough that small curls of white material still clung to the edges. Somebody had scratched a message into the lid. Nobody spoke. We just stood there reading it, over and over again, trying to convince ourselves we'd misunderstood. The message read, "There are 7 of you now." For a long time, nobody said anything. Then Jake laughed, not because it was funny, because it was the only thing he could think to do. He kept laughing. Nobody joined in. The 6 of us stood around the fire, looking at the cool box, looking at each other, and I realized something terrifying. I realized I couldn't remember who had been running beside me when we'd left the second campsite. Nobody slept after that, not even for a minute. The 6 of us stayed around the fire until sunrise. Nobody wanted to be alone. Nobody wanted to leave the light. And nobody wanted to talk about the message scratched into the cool box. Around dawn, Jake finally said what all of us had been thinking. "We should count." Nobody replied. "We should just count." It sounded stupid, childish even, but nobody had a better idea, so we did, one by one. 6 people, exactly 6. We counted again. Still 6. The relief was immediate, almost embarrassing. People laughed. The tension disappeared. The message was a prank, a coincidence, something we'd imagined after seeing the second campsite. By the time we packed up, things almost felt normal again. The drive home was quiet. Nobody wanted to discuss what had happened. Within a few weeks, life moved on. The trip became one of those stories we'd occasionally bring up after a few drinks, always followed by nervous laughter, always ending with somebody changing the subject. Then, 3 months later, Jake disappeared. No note, no warning, nothing. The police searched for weeks. They never found him. The last person to speak with him was Matt. According to Matt, Jake had become obsessed with the trip. He'd started keeping notes, drawing maps, trying to work out what had happened that night. Matt said Jake kept repeating the same thing, over and over. He was convinced we'd counted wrong. Not that there had been 7. That wasn't the part that bothered him. What bothered him was that there had only been 6. Jake believed the message wasn't a warning. It was a correction. A few days after Jake vanished, Matt received a package, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded in half, Nothing else, no explanation. Just a list of names. The names of everyone who had gone on the trip. Matt, me, the others. 6 names in total. At the bottom of the page, Jake had written one final sentence, a sentence nobody has ever been able to explain. It read, "We kept counting ourselves. Nobody ever counted who was missing." 3 months after Jake disappeared, we met at Matt's house to go through the notes he'd left behind. At first, none of it seemed unusual. Maps, timelines, sketches of the campsite, pages filled with questions. Most of them had been crossed out. Some had been answered, others hadn't. Then we found the photographs. Not photographs from the camping trip. Every photograph, school photos, birthday parties, family holidays, years of memories. Jake had gone through every one of them with a red pen. Different people were circled in different pictures. Some appeared more than once. Others only appeared a single time. Beside every circle, he'd written the same sentence. "I don't know who this is." There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The strange thing was that there didn't seem to be any pattern. Different ages, different places, different groups of people. Yet Jake had singled them all out. Eventually we stopped looking at the photographs and moved on to the notebooks. That's when the argument started. One page contained nothing except a list of questions. Questions Jake had apparently asked each of us before he disappeared. Simple questions. Questions that should have had simple answers. Who suggested the camping trip? Nobody agreed. Matt was certain it had been Jake. I could have sworn it was Jake too, but Ryan insisted it had been Matt. Then Chris said he thought it had been him. The more we talked, the worse it got. Who found the campsite? Nobody agreed. Who bought the beer? Nobody agreed. Who drove up first? Nobody agreed. At first we laughed about it, then the laughter stopped, because these weren't small details anymore. Some of us remembered arriving before sunset. Others remembered setting up camp in the dark. One of us remembered stopping at a petrol station on the way. The others had no memory of it at all. Every answer created another contradiction. Every conversation created another problem. By the end of the night, nobody knew what to believe. It was like 6 different people had gone on 6 different camping trips. Nobody spoke much after that meeting. We packed up Jake's notes and left. I think all of us were relieved to get away from them. For a while, life returned to normal, or at least, we pretended it had. Then Matt called me. He'd found something we'd missed. One final notebook. It had been hidden inside a box of old camping gear. Most of the pages were blank, with photographs tucked inside. The rest contained lists, dates, locations, names, dozens of them. Every entry followed the same format: a person's name, a date, and a single question mark. They all sounded strangely familiar. The problem was that nobody could agree on how we knew them. Then Matt turned to the final page. Unlike the others, it wasn't a list. It was paragraphs and paragraphs of writing. The handwriting was messy, rushed, almost unreadable. We spent nearly an hour trying to decipher it all. The first entry read, "I think I've worked it out. Nobody is being replaced. Nobody is being copied. People are being forgotten. That's why nobody agrees. That's why the numbers never make sense. The campsite wasn't creating anything. It was taking people away." The further we read, the more frantic the handwriting became. Near the end, entire lines had been filled with the same sentence written over and over again. How many were there before? Matt spread all of the photographs we found across the table, dozens of them, years worth. That's when he noticed it. One photograph showed 8 people around a campfire. Another showed 7. Another showed 6. The photographs were covered in notes, dates, arrows, question marks, and the same 2 words appearing again and again. Count them. For the next hour, that's exactly what we did. We counted faces, compared names, tried to build a timeline. The more we looked, the less sense it made. The numbers changed, the memories changed, yet somehow Every photograph felt incomplete, like something had been removed or someone. But what did the message mean? There are 7 of you now. For months, we'd assumed it was a threat, a warning left by whatever had been circling the campsite that night. Now I wasn't so sure, because if Jake was right, if the campsite had always been taking people away, then the message wasn't describing a loss, it was describing an increase. The number had gone up, not down. And for the first time since Jake disappeared, a thought occurred to me that was far worse than anything we'd considered before. What if something had finally started coming back?